My favorite film this week is from 2010. It is called Senna, and it is written by Manish Pandey and directed by Asif Kapadia. It is the only documentary on my list, and it is a masterclass in the genre. Some say we're living in a golden age of the documentary. I would beg to differ. There are certainly a great many documentaries made these days, but this has more to do with digital photography and how inexpensive filmmaking can be, more than anything else. The planted axiom in most documentaries is that audiences will be as interested in their subjects as the filmmakers. Putting together a bunch of talking heads and encouraging them to rabbit on about something or someone is not a substitute for form, for vision, and for a point of view. It is especially not a substitute for the power of chronology. Every life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Few denouements are as dramatic as Ayrton Senna's, but death is always as dramatic as it is inevitable. Ayrton Senna was a Formula One driver, and so he danced with death for a living. He didn't win the most races or the most championships, but the singular focus of this film is to impress upon us that he was the best driver and the purest, a man with a special relationship with God and a unique relationship with his homeland of Brazil. Everything extrinsic to this goal has been ruthlessly excised. Nelson Piquet, another Brazilian, a contemporary and a rival of Senna who also won 3 Formula One championships, barely gets a look in. Emerson Fittipaldi, who won 2 F1 championships, a kart championship, and the Indianapolis 500 twice, is never mentioned, only glimpsed briefly as a pallbearer at Senna's funeral. Instead, Senna realizes the power of heroes and villains. Ayrton Senna is our hero, of course. The villains are Frenchmen, 4-time F1 champion and erstwhile teammate Alain Prost and his supposed minion Jean-Marie Balestre, head of FISA, the Fédération Internationale du Sport Automobile, F1's governing body. Balestre is straight from central casting. Get me a sinister, supercilious Frenchie. Bonus points for dressing in black and eyes hooded behind thick spectacles. Prost, the little professor, wins by racing for points and exploiting every nook and cranny of the rules. And if the rules are clearly not in his favor, as at the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix, he has his bureaucrat henchman Balestre to put his thumb on the scales. It is suggested that Prost is a coward, specifically at the 1984 Monaco Grand Prix, where Senna, in his little-regarded ride, would have won, except that Prost pulled in yet another favor. Prost rages against Senna's attachment to God, arguing that Senna's closeness to the Almighty is both outrageously primordial in these days of science and a threat to all other drivers. Even their dual success with women is somehow twisted to Prost's disadvantage. We are never told that Senna was once married, and his rather louche interaction with the Brazilian TV star is presented as essentially innocent, whereas we are clearly supposed to regard Prost's on-air seduction of Selina Scott, the ridiculously beautiful English journalist, as somehow sinister à la Française. Brazil is a Catholic country, and Ayrton Senna was a devoutly religious man, but Senna's faith seems barely Catholic. It is something of a shock that the only Catholic gesture we see in this film comes from Prost, when he makes the sign of the cross. "Nothing can separate me from the love of God," was Senna's motto. It adorns his tombstone, but the nature of his belief remains a mystery. Senna believed himself to be chosen. For what, we can only guess. This film makes the argument that he was a martyr to purity, and a scandal against all those who would profane motor racing. His was a death foretold and a memento of the last glorious age of Formula One, before it was entirely consumed by money, politics, and cheating. His apotheosis at the San Marino Grand Prix of 1984 is made explicit when his friend Sid Watkins, the chief F1 physician, explains that, though he was not a religious man, he felt Senna's soul depart his earthly body at the moment of his death, a death the craven overseers of Formula One kept hidden from the thousands at Imola and the hundreds of millions watching on television. Ayrton Senna's body was translated to Brazil, and an extraordinary transmogrification occurred. In death, he became a saint, a kind of John the Baptist for the multitudes hungering for something that would give their lives meaning. And in death, all his enemies, even Prost, were compelled to pay homage. And then we are transported back to the beginning, back to Senna's time in go-karting, a time when there was no politics, no money, simply the purity of sport, a prelapsarian paradise. It is a testimony to the power of this film, of the power of documentary done well, that this myth becomes real and overpowering. Senna is compiled from hundreds of contemporary sources of varying quality. One might think that so much of it being lo-fi would detract from its power. Quite the contrary. The film conveys life as it happened, and such is its quality that even those who know the ending from the beginning will find themselves hoping against hope for a different ending. Senna is available inexpensively in both North America and Britain from Universal and region-free Blu-rays. The British version has an extra extended version, which features about an hour of commentary from the well-informed likes of Richard Williams. It is more but less, for F1 aficionados only. Universal is to be commended for making all its Blu-rays truly universal and not subject to the region code cartel.